Assuming that I've identified a property that I really like, what are the hints and tips that you can give to somebody to be successful and win at auctions?
I mean, first and foremost, and this might sound obvious, but go and look at it. Go and look at the property.
Step one.
Step one. I mean,
is that step one?
I think it's step one. Yeah. I mean, for me, I wouldn't spend £200 on a pair of shoes without trying them on first. Yet it never ceases to amaze me the number of people who will spend hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not millions of pounds, on a property that they haven't even physically seen. Yeah. So I think that's important. And it might seem like an obvious thing to say, but it's amazing how many people don't. So I think it's crucial. And following on from that, doing one's homework. The legal pack that the seller's solicitor produces is there for good reason. Because, of course, for those who aren't aware, with an auction, because you're exchanging contracts when the hammer goes down, there's no wiggle room in getting a survey done afterwards and saying, well, hang on, the roof needs £5,000 worth of work. You can't chip your offer. That's it. You've got skin in the game at the level at the hammer price. So all of that work that would normally be done by a buyer's solicitor in terms of the conveyance is done by the seller's solicitor and produced in the form of the legal pack. So reading that very carefully and making sure that if there's anything at all you don't understand, having a solicitor also read that for you, just to be able to make sure that you've got full information, you know exactly what it is that you're buying. And I always say this at the start of every auction, if you don't know exactly what it is that you're bidding on, please don't bid. Yeah. Which again is an odd thing to say, but some people sort of often get raised eyebrows. But once the hammer goes down, it's impossible to do anything about it, or very difficult to do anything about it. So so doing one's homework is really important.
So legal pack, viewing. Mm-hmm.
It's then looking for the added value, where value can be added. And sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes less so. So making sure that you know where the angles are, you know what you can do in terms of maximizing value, and having that exit strategy. And this, again, is something that Jay and Piotr talk about very much in their book, is about having that exit strategy is super, super important, which I think sometimes is overlooked by some people. They'll think, oh, it's the right property in the area that I like, it needs work to do, I can make a profit on that. And that's as far as the thinking goes. But I think actually having the exit, the most important bit where you get your money,
absolutely,
is really, really important to be looking at. And I think probably finally the other thing I would say is talk to your auctioneer. Touched on it before, but we've got a duty of care to buyers as well as our sellers to make sure we're disclosing everything. And certain things might not be immediately obvious, or just asking the questions of your auctioneer about, levels of interest. We are normally pretty open and talkative people, as I said before. So happy to talk about the property, and we want to be understand what buyers want, because we talk to our sellers a lot before we list the property. So we know what they want, and it's only until the marketing starts and people start calling us that we know what buyers want. So it's important to make sure that you have that communication. And that you ask the right questions.
And so, do you get people like buyers saying, could you give that investment advice? Because I suppose that's taking like one next step of, like, okay, here's a shop and uppers. And do you get any people like calling you saying, oh, that looks interesting, what can I do with it? Because then that's like, well, there's so many things, you've got to almost go away and do your own homework.
I think that's important. Certainly I will normally, on a property that I list, I'll have my own views on it, and I'll have a good understanding of what can and can't be done. So I'm always very happy to chat it out with people to try and sort of give them some ideas that they might not have thought of before, and to try and just give them the benefit of my experience. But certainly, you shouldn't go to an auction to buy something without knowing what it is that you actually want to do. And I think that doing one's own homework broadens the abilities of a buyer, of a property developer, someone who's making their first forays into auction. Because if somebody else, and I think when people start, there's always somebody helping them. usually always someone helping, whether it's someone from a property club, like where we
Yeah.
go and do our talks, or whether they've got friends and family who've done these things previously. But it's the whole give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime kind of situation. So the more a person does it for themselves, then they're going to be far better at seeing those angles and identifying a property in a catalogue that might be being overlooked by others, but with that experience comes the ability to pick out what's going to be useful for it.
And that it's in the same way as like private treaty as well. In terms of value, what somebody might see in a deal is completely different to because somebody else might say, well, actually, I might be able to use the back of that shop for X, Y, and Z that I've got going on.
Correct.
And if I can do the other stuff with the shop, actually, I can afford to probably pay a little bit more than anybody else.
Yeah.
So that from that point of view, I think it's the same as the private treaty. So it's sometimes a little bit difficult, perhaps, to give too much of an influence on how to see things. It's almost the individual needs to take it upon themselves to see the value from in the eye of the beholder, I guess.
Absolutely, and I think you're 100% right with that. But I think that the more you do, the more deals you do, the greater that experience becomes. And it's like with anything. There are things that the first 5 deals that any investor or developer or whoever does, there'll be mistakes made. There'll be things that they don't do quite right. And I'm a firm believer that you learn far more from your defeats than you do from your victories. And I think that's important, having the corners knocked off you with property development. Because it's very easy to, I think a lot of people will come into property investing and development thinking, oh, this will be easy. And it's only when they actually get down to the nuts and bolts of it, that granular detail of having everything planned out and nicely organized. And sometimes these mistakes happen through no one's fault, but you learn that experience and you're aware of what not to do next time. And that's probably equally as important as what you do next time.